So they sabotage, they push away, lash out, lie or cheat, not always because they want to hurt you, but because they want to protect themselves. If they sense that you see too much, feel too deeply, or question too boldly, they'll retreat or retaliate. And betrayal becomes a way to regain control of the narrative. If they hurt you before you can fully see them, they believe they've escaped the threat of exposure. It's twisted logic. Better to destroy the relationship and play the victim than to stay and risk being truly seen for who they are. Their fear isn't just about being judged, it's about being found out. And if anyone truly saw the extent of their emotional dysfunction, it would destroy the image they've worked so hard to project. The illusion of indifference is one of the most powerful and painful dynamics in a narcissistic relationship. After the betrayal, you're left staring at someone who looks completely unbothered, detached, maybe even thriving. It's maddening. They ghost you, block you, post pictures with someone new, or act like you never existed. It feels like they're sailing through life without a second thought while you're drowning in confusion, heartbreak, and a desperate search for closure. That indifference isn't just casual disregard, it's calculated. It's part of the act. Narcissists are masters of control, and showing you that they don't care is a way to keep the upper hand. Because if they look unaffected, if they act like nothing you gave them ever mattered, then they win, or at least that's what they tell themselves. But here's the truth they will never say out loud. It's not real. That cold, detached exterior is a defense mechanism. Underneath that facade is a person whose self-worth is so fragile they can't face the reality of what they've done or who they are. To them, vulnerability is weakness, and admitting pain would mean admitting that they aren't the one in control. That terrifies them. So instead of processing the damage they caused or sitting in the discomfort of guilt, they project this ice-cold persona. They pretend your love meant nothing, your loyalty was disposable, and your pain is irrelevant. They convince themselves that distancing from you, cutting you off, or replacing you is strength. But in reality, it's avoidance. It's denial. The illusion of indifference is also meant to serve as a message, not just to you, but to themselves. It's a form of psychological warfare. By acting like they don't care, they try to invalidate everything you shared. They want you to question your worth, your memory, even your sanity. That's where their power used to come from. Confusion, second-guessing, emotional imbalance. But what's actually happening behind that mask is far more complex than simple cold-heartedness. In many cases, the narcissist is flooded with emotions they can't regulate. They feel guilt but suppress it. They feel fear but disguise it as arrogance. They feel emptiness but cover it with distractions, new people, or achievements that don't really mean anything. But they can't let you see any of that. Because to them, the moment you realize they're affected too, the moment you see even a flicker of remorse or insecurity, is the moment they lose their grip. And make no mistake, that illusion comes at a cost. Narcissists are not emotionless robots. They are often deeply wounded individuals who have learned to protect themselves through manipulation, emotional armor, and self-deception. When they betray someone who truly loved them, there is a reaction. It's just buried under layers of ego, shame, and pride. They might obsessively check your social media. They might stalk you silently through mutual friends. They might even lash out, not because they don't care, but because they care too much and have no idea how to handle it. Indifference is their shield, not their truth. The most important thing for you to remember is this: just because they don't show it doesn't mean they don't feel it. The betrayal wasn't proof of your inadequacy. It was a reflection of their brokenness. The coldness you saw afterward, it's not emotional maturity, it's emotional dysfunction. And the illusion of indifference isn't sustainable. Sooner or later, reality catches up. The silence becomes deafening. The replacements stop working. The mirror becomes harder to look into. But by then, you will have healed. You will have stopped looking for proof that you mattered. You'll know you did. You'll no longer need their validation, because you'll finally understand what they showed you wasn't the truth. It was the illusion they had to believe so they wouldn't have to face themselves. So let them keep the act. Let them play unbothered. That's not your burden to carry. Your healing doesn't require their remorse, and your peace doesn't depend on their confession, because the truth always finds its way to the surface, and deep down they know it. They feel it, even if they'll never say it. The narcissist's hidden shame is one of the most carefully guarded secrets in their emotional world. At first glance, it's easy to believe they don't feel shame at all. They come across as confident, self-assured, sometimes even arrogant. They talk over others, dismiss feedback, and constantly position themselves as the smartest or most important person in the room. But this isn't genuine confidence, it's a performance built to conceal something much darker and far more fragile. At the core of almost every narcissist lies a deep, toxic well of shame that they've been carrying, often since childhood, and they will do anything to avoid confronting it. This shame shows up in subtle and manipulative ways. Think about how quickly they shift blame, how easily they rewrite the story to make themselves the victim, how often they invalidate your experience. They do this not because they lack awareness, but because admitting fault feels like annihilation. To them, acknowledging wrongdoing means peeling back the mask, and underneath that mask is a person who's terrified of being exposed, rejected, or abandoned. Shame tells them that if people really saw who they are behind the charm and confidence, they'd walk away. So they lie, they blame, they betray, because in their distorted reality, that feels safer than being vulnerable. But the irony is every betrayal adds to that shame. Every broken relationship, every lie told, every mask worn adds another layer to their internal prison. And deep down, they know it. They know they destroyed something good. They know they hurt someone who didn't deserve it. But rather than apologize or make amends, they double down. They tell themselves, you were weak, you were crazy, you were never really that important. Because if they don't, they'd have to sit in the truth that they pushed away love and they did it on purpose. The guilt becomes shame, and the shame becomes armor. And that armor hardens with every lie they tell themselves. This is why so many narcissists repeat the same toxic cycles in every relationship. They don't just fear being vulnerable with others, they fear being vulnerable with themselves. Shame prevents them from learning, growing, or healing, because healing would require honesty. And honesty would mean facing the brokenness they've spent a lifetime covering up. So instead of confronting the shame and doing the deep work, they look for their next source of validation. Another person to idolize them, another distraction to help them forget. But the shame is always waiting. It follows them from relationship to relationship, job to job, one temporary high to the next inevitable crash. And here's the painful truth. The more love you gave them, the more shame they felt. Because love doesn't just heal, it exposes. When you loved them, you saw through the performance, you reached for the human behind the mask. And for a brief moment, they felt both seen and terrified. They betrayed you not just because they could, but because they couldn't handle being fully known. That shame, buried so deep, told them they didn't deserve you. And instead of rising to the occasion, they ran. So if you're still sitting in confusion, wondering how someone could hurt you like that and feel nothing, understand this. They do feel something, but it's buried under layers of denial, fear, and shame they refuse to face. They're not unaffected. They're just emotionally unequipped to deal with the mess they made. And while you're learning, healing, and evolving, they're stuck in a cycle of self-sabotage that looks like control on the outside, but is pure chaos underneath. They wear confidence like a mask, but shame is what's really behind their eyes. Control is everything. To a narcissist, it's not just something they want, it's something they need. From the moment they enter a relationship, they begin constructing a dynamic where they hold the upper hand. Whether it's through charm, manipulation, gaslighting, or emotional withdrawal, the goal is always the same: to stay in control of how they are seen, how they are treated, and how the relationship unfolds. But what's often misunderstood is why control is so vital to them. On the surface, it looks like arrogance or dominance, but beneath that is a deep fear of vulnerability and emotional unpredictability. Control for them is a way to manage their own internal chaos, a shield against the parts of themselves they don't want to face. When a narcissist betrays you, it's rarely an impulsive act. It's often something they rationalize long before it happens. They begin to see your growing awareness, your increasing emotional strength, your unwillingness to play along with their narrative, and it threatens them. Your clarity puts pressure on the lies they tell themselves. So in a twisted form of self-preservation, they take control of the situation by pulling away, cheating, discarding, or sabotaging the connection. From the outside, it looks like selfishness, but on the inside, it's panic. They fear being truly known. They fear being seen as flawed. And most of all, they fear losing control of the image they've worked so hard to maintain. The betrayal itself is an act of control. It flips the emotional power dynamic. Suddenly, you're the one left confused, hurt, questioning everything. They have the upper hand again, not because they're stronger, but because they've shattered your sense of security. It's a pattern. Push you away, watch you fall apart, and convince themselves that your emotional reaction justifies their detachment. They use your pain as proof that they were right to take control. It's not empathy they feel in that moment, it's relief. Relief that they've managed to avoid the vulnerability of accountability. But this kind of control isn't real power, it's avoidance. It's an illusion built on fear. What makes it even more disturbing is how subtle this control can be. It's not always about shouting or overt manipulation. Sometimes it's the quiet withdrawal when you need comfort, the passive-aggressive comment when you express joy, or the backhanded compliment that makes you second-guess your worth. These are all tactics designed to keep you off balance, to make sure they are the emotional center of your world. Because if you're too focused on deciphering their behavior, you're not paying attention to your own needs, your own growth, or the inconsistencies in their story. It's a slow erosion of your self-trust, all for the sake of their emotional control. And yet, ironically, the narcissist is rarely in control of themselves. Their need for dominance over others stems from an inner chaos they can't regulate. Their emotions swing between grandiosity and insecurity, and without constant reassurance, they spiral. That's why they micromanage relationships. That's why they demand loyalty without offering honesty. That's why they panic when you begin to pull away, not because they love deeply, but because they're losing the ability to control how they're perceived. Every confrontation, every boundary you try to set feels like a threat to their identity, so they tighten their grip or retreat completely. Either way, it's not about connection, it's about maintaining emotional authority. Eventually, that need for control becomes their downfall, because real relationships require vulnerability, mutual respect, and emotional flexibility, none of which can survive in the environment a narcissist creates. The more they try to control others, the more disconnected they become. They push people away without understanding why intimacy always feels unsafe. They destroy good things because anything they can't dominate feels like a risk. And after the betrayal, when they watch you hurting from a distance, they might feel a flicker of guilt, but it's quickly buried by the comfort of control. As long as they're not the one bleeding, they feel safe. But here's what they don't see. The control they cling to is actually a prison. It isolates them, blinds them, keeps them stuck in a cycle where every connection is short-lived, every truth is avoided, and every relationship becomes a battlefield. Meanwhile, once you break free, begin to rebuild. You start choosing authenticity over confusion, peace over power plays, healing over games. And in that process, you reclaim the very thing they tried to take from you, your sense of self. Because true power doesn't come from controlling others, it comes from mastering yourself. And that's something the narcissist may never understand. When you're in a relationship with a narcissist, you slowly begin to see inconsistencies in their stories, cracks in their confidence, emotional outbursts that don't match the situation. You notice the way they manipulate, how they rewrite history, how their words and actions often don't align. And if you love them, you probably tried to understand it. You tried to reach them. But the closer you get to the truth, the more defensive they become. That's because love is dangerous to a narcissist. Not because they don't crave it, but because real love requires openness. It requires being known. And to be known is to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is what exposes the truth behind their mask. And that is something they cannot tolerate. So they sabotage, they push away, lash out, lie or cheat, not always because they want to hurt you, but because they want to protect themselves. If they sense that you see too much, feel too deeply, or question too boldly, they'll retreat or retaliate. And betrayal becomes a way to regain control of the narrative. If they hurt you before you can fully see them, they believe they've escaped the threat of exposure. It's twisted logic. Better to destroy the relationship and play the victim than to stay and risk being truly seen for who they are. Their fear isn't just about being judged, it's about being found out. And if anyone truly saw the extent of their emotional dysfunction, it would destroy the image they've worked so hard to project. But no matter how much they run, that fear never goes away. It follows them into every new connection, every new relationship, because deep down they know the truth. They know they betrayed someone who loved them. They know they destroyed something meaningful to avoid facing themselves. And that knowledge gnaws at them. It's not always visible, but it's there in the way they need constant admiration, in the way they overcompensate with bravado, in the emptiness they try to fill with attention, sex, money, or status. The fear of exposure doesn't just shape their actions, it defines their entire existence. And here's what makes it even more tragic. The very thing they fear, being truly seen, is also the key to their healing. If they could just drop the act, confront their shame, and allow themselves to be vulnerable, they might actually experience real connection. But most don't, because that would require humility. It would require admitting that the mask they've worn for years isn't who they really are. And for someone who has built their whole life on illusion, that kind of honesty feels like death. So, when they betray you and pretend they feel nothing, remember it's not strength you're seeing. It's fear. It's a person doing everything they can to keep from being exposed. You, by contrast, have faced pain, truth, and healing. You've walked through fire and come out stronger. They're still hiding, still running, still terrified of the one thing you've already conquered, being real. The empty hive betrayal is one of the most misunderstood aspects of narcissistic behavior. To someone on the receiving end, the betrayal feels deeply personal, an emotional earthquake that shakes your trust, your self-worth, and your understanding of love. But for the narcissist, betrayal often creates a temporary high, a rush of power and superiority that makes them feel alive, in control, and validated. For a brief moment, they feel untouchable. They've hurt someone who cared, manipulated the outcome, and walked away without accountability. That gives them a sense of dominance. It's not love they're after, it's the ego boost that comes from proving they can break hearts and still be admired, or at least feared. But this high never lasts. It's shallow, it's hollow, and sooner or later the crash comes. Narcissists are addicted to emotional intensity, and betrayal offers a quick hit of that intensity. It feeds their need to feel significant, especially if they're starting to sense that their partner is seeing through their mask. The more you start to ask questions, set boundaries, or expect emotional honesty, the more anxious they become. They interpret this as a threat to their false self. And betrayal becomes a way to regain control and restore their sense of dominance. Whether it's cheating, ghosting, triangulating with someone new, or simply discarding you without warning, the act of betrayal lets them rewrite the script. It's their way of saying, I still have power here. That moment of betrayal isn't always planned, but it's always strategic in some way. It's about sending a message, both to you and to themselves, that they are in charge of how things end. Immediately after the betrayal, they often seem energized, confident, even euphoric. It's as if they've dodged a bullet and come out victorious. They might flaunt a new relationship, post cryptic messages online, or act completely indifferent to the pain they caused. But that confidence is artificial. The high they experience is like junk food for the soul. It satisfies for a moment, but leaves them emptier than before. Deep down, they're not thriving, they're escaping. They're running from the vulnerability and emotional intimacy that triggered their fear in the first place. The betrayal isn't a bold declaration of freedom. It's a sign of their emotional immaturity and inability to face hard truths. The most ironic part of it all is that betrayal doesn't make them feel powerful in the long run. It makes them feel weaker, because every time they sabotage something real, something that might have helped them grow or heal, they reinforce the belief that they are unlovable or incapable of true connection. They may never admit this, not even to themselves, but their patterns speak louder than their words. The betrayals become a cycle: idealize, devalue, discard. And each time, the high gets shorter and the crash gets harder. Because no matter how many times they play the game, they always end up back where they started, alone, ashamed, and desperate to avoid looking in the mirror. The narcissist's empty high is fleeting. It's a momentary illusion of power that ultimately deepens their own dysfunction. What looks like freedom is actually avoidance. What feels like victory is actually loss. And what they gain in short-term gratification, they lose in long-term peace. Because real peace can't be built on betrayal. It can only be found in truth, and that's something they keep running from. Regret is a complicated thing for a narcissist. On the surface, it may appear that they feel nothing after they betray you. They might seem cold, detached, even content with their decision to walk away or cause pain. But beneath that surface, behind all the denial and bravado, lies a very different story, one filled with buried regret they are too proud to face. Narcissists are not immune to regret. In fact, many experience it intensely, but it's often twisted, suppressed, or rerouted into blame and anger. The reason is simple. For them to admit regret would be to acknowledge wrongdoing, and to do that would crack the fragile image they hold of themselves as superior, in control, and blameless. This regret doesn't come from empathy. It comes from self-interest. It's not, I hurt them and I'm sorry. It's, I lost something valuable and now I don't have it. The narcissist mourns the benefits of the relationship more than the relationship itself. They remember the admiration, the devotion, the way you made them feel special. And they realize often too late that those things don't come easily. When they betray you and move on, they expect to find the same validation somewhere else. But over time, they learn that not everyone will tolerate their behavior. Not everyone will give them unconditional love, and not everyone will stay after being mistreated. That's when the regret starts to burn. It doesn't soften them. It irritates them. Because regret to a narcissist feels like weakness. And weakness is something they were taught either by trauma or conditioning to hide at all costs.